Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Oh, welcome back, everybody. I am intrigued to bring our next guest on today because it might answer a lot of questions that you wonder about regarding yourself, regarding your mind, how your brain works. I honestly think about this a lot. And I'm going to admit, I regret not taking more courses when I was younger in psychology and all of that. I was like, man, I don't need that. I'm already doing what I want to do. I know enough, but there's so much to know. There's so much that they're finding out every day. She's also got a wonderful book that kind of delves into what we're going to be talking about today. She is the CEO and founder of a leading mental health company focused on therapeutics, including ketamine and lots of other psychedelic therapies to support us and make this thing work better. And she's back with us. Katie Walker joins us on the program. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. Glad to be here, as always.
Revitalist is your company, and we've never really delved into the book. Tell everybody the title of the book.
The book is called Inflamed. So the goal is that I make a series, right, called Inflamed. But this first one is called Theory. So Inflamed Theory.
Hmm. Well, right away, and that has been a word that has been trending over the last year and change. Inflammation, inflamed. Am I turning this car in the right direction?
You are, yeah, to a point, yeah. The inflamed aspect will be a little bit more multifactorial because I'm still pretty ignorant, but I'm learning. But when I first started the clinic, I had no idea how to run a clinic. And then I had VC guys come in to take my company public. I had no idea how to run a public company. And that I've been flailing at, getting better, but flailing at that since 2021. So inflamed is more about all of it, right? It's like, yes, inflammation in the body, but it's also like inflamed because you know what? Western medicine hates Eastern medicine. Eastern medicine hates Western medicine. And then when you get into this business world, then, it's this it's inflamed, it's angry of this whole business world because you've got people that are predators coming into the psychedelic space, that see the healers. So you got healers that are wanting to change the world who know nothing about business and you've got predators coming in wanting to take advantage of the healers. And you see a lot of these healers like go bankrupt because they're heart led. So I'm in here like watching both sides, like feeling both sides. So really the Inflamed series is we're going to call it all out, in a very professional way because people need to know this stuff. Like I had no idea what goes on behind the scenes. I just thought, there's certain rules you have to do. Yes, and there's certain things you have to do, but there are so many loopholes that people jump through and manipulate, and there's just bad
Oh yeah.
people out there.
Oh yeah.
And I've seen a lot of it.
Me
And
too.
they'll lie to your face. And I'm not here to do that. It's like, all right, we're not here to play those games, but I'm going to be in it to help guide this. And hopefully this company is going to become a beacon of like, bring it on. Like we're here. This is a heart-led mission. I'm going to learn to understand a lot of the business stuff, which I'm learning. But I'm not going to back down. I'm going to let these business guys, they'll push me into a hole or into a corner, which they've tried to do a couple of times. Like I've had two failed, successful for me, hostile attempts, to where I've had two groups, one public group, one private group come in, try to do a hostile takeover with me. And I was able to push both of them out, right? Because they see it's a good idea and they come in, they're, oh, this is going to make us a lot of money, and they both have tried to push me out of my own company. And yeah, no, not doing it, not playing those games. And I'm still here, but gosh, it's hard. It's hard. And I see why people fail emotionally, mentally, physically. I see why people kill themselves going down this road where they're trying to make a big change. And then a lot of the bad comes up. Like it's a lot, Steve, a lot. And
It's
there's people always attacking you all the time.
more
Uh,
than I think many of us even realize, and I can completely relate. It was a number of years ago. I was connected to somebody who is a healer and started a major website. And he asked me to come in and help out, take a look at it. I was in between jobs. I was looking for something new too. And 3 days in, and I don't know a lot, but I just lifted the hood on that website and I'm like, dude, we have a major problem. And he spent a lot of money and he was a very notable figure, still is. Um, so much to the fact that I got him on The View with Whoopi Goldberg and everything to promote the website. And I'll never forget the day we're all hanging out with his team and they're on TV and now the world is watching and the website crashed because these people took advantage of him and he was already in and had to restructure everything. We had to like rebuild it. So yeah, there are people out there that it blows my mind how people can act toward other people, especially people that are trying to help others and heal others. I guess
Mhm.
these unscrupulous individuals look at those as the weaker ones. They're just on their mission to help and they don't know what they're doing, and it pounce on top of them. Such a shame.
Yep.
Such a shame.
Yep. No, they do. And when I say predators, I mean, I mean it. Like, I mean, these
Yeah.
people, and it was interesting because I saw it after a while, what they look at. They wait a lot of times to see vulnerabilities, and that's when they take advantage of people.
Mm.
And that's the last thing we need. It's like this world is like caving in right now, global crisis, right? And it's like, if anything, we all need to pull together, and it's going to be an amazing story once we do it. But buddy, we got to get a lot of people out of the way.
Mm.
Yep.
So let's talk about
Back
your
to the book.
theories. Back to the book and what's going on with the because I'm intrigued about the inflammation whole concept and what's causing it within our bodies and what's throwing us out of whack and everything. I don't even know where to begin. You tell me.
Okay. So I'll tell you my theory in the way that, so I wrote the book. It's 68 pages. It's very short. You can
Wow.
roll it up and put it in your back pocket, right? So I'm like, okay, use it as a brain manual. To me, it's very simple. But when I was actually reading it for Audible, I was like, oh, I could see why people would think this is kind of complex. So I think our brains are not eclectic. I think they're very complex, which it makes them look eclectic. But I think that our brains follow very similar patterns. It's like your heart and my heart, even though they're different, they still have a similar function and structure. And that's what I think our brains do. They have a very similar structure and function. So I think the brain functions on universal laws. And one of Newton's laws of motion is every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I think that's one of the primaries. And I think the second one is the law of conservative energy. With energy, it's not created nor destroyed, it's only transferred. So when we hit conflict can be anything, literally anything. It's something that makes you go, huh, hold on, wait 1 second. That's kind of conflict, right? It's when we don't know the answer. And conflict, I've noticed, happens a lot between the ages of 5 and 7, 11 to 13, when we change schools, when we change jobs, when we get married, when we have a child, when we get divorced, when we lose a pet. It's something that changes our day-to-day routine. That's conflict. So if you think about Newton's law of motion, every action has equal and opposite reaction. When we hit conflict, like our brain is supposed to be in the present. That's a healthy brain, is living in the present. When our brain hits conflict, it goes to polarities and it will stay in polarities until we can learn to effectively integrate it again. So if you think about people like, a lot of the examples, now let's see in the books, is like chaos and calm. Calm is completely opposite of chaos. If you get people, and this is something that I'm pretty probably controversial about, everybody loves to talk about childhood trauma.
Mm.
My personal opinion is childhood trauma doesn't, it's not the specifics in childhood trauma that actually cause us to have mental health issues. It's the overarching energy of that environment. So if you think about like children who go through childhood trauma, they're always in an environment of chaos because they're little, they don't know what to expect, and they never know what's going to catch them off guard. So at all times, they're learning to live and thrive because they have to in chaos. So as they get older, if there's not a chaotic environment, they usually will start something to make more chaos because they don't know how to live in calm, right?
100%.
And what we do in life is we say, why am I so chaotic? I don't want to be chaotic. Like I'm not this person. I don't need to be doing 80-hour weeks. I don't need to do this. Like, and we start like trying to push out chaos when in reality, we need to look at what is the opposite of chaos and turn to calm and instead say, I don't know how to be calm. I need to work on that. So think about the law of conservative energy, right? If we're focused on something, that's going to get stronger because our energy keeps going there. And that's what happens with like depression and anxiety. So, like, the opposite of depression is anxiety. They're opposites. Think about it, right? Depression, I look at depression as hibernation. I look at anxiety as hyperactivity. So, it's like way up here or way down here. But people who struggle with their mental health typically coexist with anxieties and depressions at the same time. And, either one will start to take off more than the other, but they usually stay in that same realm. So when people are depressed, they'll say, I don't want to be depressed. I don't know why I don't like my life. Like, I should be happy, Steve. I don't know why I'm like this. I don't want to get out of bed, but I don't know why, but I am not a depressed person. I don't want to be a depressed person. So what are we doing? We're sitting there focusing on what we don't want instead of focusing on what we don't have. And what we don't have is the ability to look at the opposite and to focus on that. So I'll tell people, it's like when you have something negative come up, like, even Google it. What is the opposite of? What's the opposite of fear? What's the opposite of isolation? What is the opposite of, all these things? And instead of focusing on getting out the bad, we need to focus on how to build the good. And if we look at our brain as a spectrum, then that's how we can start integrating again. Because a lot of people who get diagnosed with a term called bipolar, think about bipolar. It's so common. Everybody's like, oh, I'm bipolar, but it's like bipolar. They're living in opposite ends of the spectrum, and they don't have this skill set here in the middle, and they'll just stay there until they can start integrating it. So this book, it gives more specifics about, like, Newton's law, how I look at that, the law of conservative energy, talks about like what vulnerability means. And vulnerability, like, I love that term because I love it because it's so inappropriately used. I want people to learn more about vulnerability. But, women are like, or whoever, right? Whoever's attracted to men, are like, oh, it's so sexy when a man's vulnerable, like, kind of thing when they cry at movies. It's like, no, that's not vulnerability. Vulnerability is when you're in a state of being out of control. And you think of what is the state of being out of control? Over control. And I think vulnerability ties in a lot with suicidality too, personally. Because vulnerability is when I drop you, Steve Harper, off in the Congo. You have no money, you have no friends, you have nowhere to go, you don't speak the language. You are then in a vulnerable state, which is a state of being out of control. And what will happen typically is we will become into a state of over control. So we become more reactive in that environment. We become more in survival state. So we will sit there in this reactive survival state if we feel out of control in life. And when you're like that, if you keep doing that, the brain duplicates what it knows. And I talk about duplication in the book as well, because I always like to ask people, in universal languages, everybody believes in muscle memory. Our muscles don't have memory. Like, they're fibers. They contract, they relax. That's all they do. The brain remembers the physical piece. The brain also remembers the behavioral piece. So if you're creating this sense of reactivity in a survivor state, you're training your brain to duplicate that and become that. And that's what we've got to try to retrain our brain to do. So instead of focusing on what we're quote unquote ill about and medicating what we're ill about, we want to medicate anger, we want to medicate anxiety, we want to medicate depression, we want to medicate OCD. What is the opposite of that? And if you look at the opposite of these things, you don't have those skills. And we need to build those skills. And that's how you find neutrality, which is how you heal, which is how you get your brain back into the present space, which is complete healthy integration of both sides.
So
Does
many
that make sense?
questions. Yeah, it really does. It really, really does.
Okay.
Lots of points here. I want to hit up when you're focusing on what you don't have or your current situation. Is that also sort of like manifestation where you're asking for it. You're asking from subconsciously, you're asking for more of it.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, because here's in medicine. This is the thing in medicine, which is interesting. If you mention energy in medicine, you're done. We're like, you're nuts, you're crazy, voodoo, because we don't believe in the term energy, but yet we do believe in the term hyperexcitable cells or hypoexcitable cells. Just means that the cells are they're vibrating more quickly or vibrating less quickly. And what is that? That's energy. So in the medical community, good God, who knows how many physics, biochemistry, organic chemistry, biology classes that we've taken. It's all based on energy, right? ATP, that's energy. That's what your cell has to have. And in the medical community, we see ATP, but if you mention energy, like you're voodoo. And what it is it's a breakdown of language barriers. And that's what we've got to figure out because, yeah, when you talk about like manifesting and putting more energy to it, in the psychedelic community or in the somatic fields or the therapy fields or acupuncture, more the eastern side, we do believe if you focus on something that it will grow. In the medical side, we think that that's voodoo. But if you go back to physics and you put more energy towards something, it aligns completely with the way that physical science and universal laws work.
Yep.
So it's maddening to a point because we're so bad at communication and understanding, but yet we're so good at judging. And we won't even give the time of day sometimes to listen to a viewpoint to try to understand how it might align with our viewpoint before we just cut it off and say no.
See, with this, everything you're talking about, for me in my journey, and I've really like hyper focused on a lot of what we're talking about here in the last 3 to 4 years, it all started coming clear. And even to illustrate your point earlier about childhood trauma, way back in the day, I was in a relationship with somebody who had a lot of that. And they love to have chaos and push buttons. I'm chill. This is it. This is me. I'm like low key. They would always want to push buttons because, just like you said, it was a place of familiarity, comfortable. That's where I feel good. And then I was, connected with somebody else years later that has lots of anxiety. And interestingly, when she's relaxed, that's when she has a problem. That's when,
Yep.
that just like everything, that quiet, everything's done. Oh my gosh. Now I'm having, even more, it exasperates the anxiety out of nowhere when it should be just a calm, chill moment. So,
But we don't even know what to do with that. So,
right.
and that, so that it's almost like the brain gets uncomfortable with that opposite, that polarity piece. It gets uncomfortable and it goes back to what it knows.
Knows,
And
right.
then we cycle and cycle and cycle. And then we medicate and we feel like less of ourselves. And I just really want people to understand like our brains are so much more than any of us know. And if we can learn to work with them instead of like, I don't know, it's like putting Elon Musk into a cage to keep him controlled instead of allowing him to go out and do these things that may, take the world to a different level. It's like that's our brain. It's like stop caging it, stop medicating it, stop putting it back into a box and learn that you're amazing and you're loved and like your brain up here is so cool. Let's
Yeah.
figure out how do we work with it, right? And unfortunately, everybody feels, I mean, I don't know. I mean, this level of like insecurities and how bad people feel about themselves and how they aren't worthy enough, like they are, so we've got to change this topic. And maybe if we change the topic to that manner, maybe that's a way that we help
Mm,
with, the global crisis of people killing themselves and feeling like they aren't enough.
sure.
I don't know.
I saw a guy the other day with a shirt and all it said is, "You are enough." And I walked up. I'm like, that's best shirt ever right there.
Yeah.
We have a couple of minutes left. I want to go way back to the beginning of what we were talking about today and childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And when a child experiences something, and look at it two ways, whether it's an ongoing situation, let's say parents are always fighting. Okay, so that's one, right? The other one is the child between the ages of 0 and 7, we'll just say, experiences a comment. And it's been said that that one comment could put a limiting belief on them for the rest of their life.
Right.
So those two situations, how do they look to you now that you've studied a lot of this?
No, I think that's good. I mean, well, because I think one thing with relationships, if we grow up with unhealthy relationships, it's really hard for us to get into a healthy relationship because we don't know what one looks like. And then the second piece is, somebody gives you a comment at that young age, yeah, it can destroy your little internal soul.
Sure.
So one thing that I think is fascinating, and you can kind of go through this and look at these patterns. So like 0 to 4 is when data comes in. So if you're looking at like EEGs, like that they measure our brain activity, 0 to 4 is just when data comes in. We have no critical thinking skills. Data comes in, we reciprocate what goes out, right? Between the ages of 5 and 7, that's when our little personalities start developing. So that's when our emotions actually start getting attached to situations. So between the ages of 5 and 7 are very, very, very important because if we're in a period of our parents fighting at that time, we may get our emotions attached to different situations between 5 and 7. But two, that's kind of where narcissism can start, believe it or not, at those little ages, because at that time is when we start having needs. And if these needs aren't met by our external world, we start meeting those needs ourselves.
When you say needs, how do you
Mhm.
define that? We're gonna run out of time. I want to just go.
You know,
Let's do a
well,
marathon.
here's okay, and I don't talk about this in the book. I should write a second book about this because I've just watched people over time with patterns and patterns and patterns, and I've tried to put two and two together. From what I've seen, there's two subsets. The first one is love, safety, and trust.
Okay.
And love is not only how do I feel, what's my love language? It's also, Steve, how do I show the world that I care for them? So it's an intake as well as an output. But it's the same with trust. How do I know, how do I show people around me that I'm trustworthy? But how do I also make sure there's people outside that I can trust? And then how do I feel safe? How do I show myself that I'm safe? And how do others feel safe around me? If we don't have love, safety, and trust, I'm pretty sure through our entire lifespan, if we don't have those three basics, we can't grow to the next level. We have to have those. And a lot of times we don't even understand that language ourselves.
Yeah.
And then the second subset, which is where people really start to grow, is ethics, virtues, and values. And those are not mine, Steve. Those are yours. That's what I try to tell people. They're like, well, how do I know? I'm like, I don't know. And this is why psychedelics become so beautiful and ketamine becomes so beautiful is because we're so influenced by our society, by our home life, by our jobs, by all these things, right? That like make our identity. So there's a lot of external influence. But when you're using ketamine and psychedelics under appropriate supervision, you're going to feel what feels right to you because you have your own ethics, you have your own values, and you have your own virtues. And the only difference between values are what's my gross overall values, virtues are values that you live day to day with. So if people can have those six things: love, safety, trust, values, virtues, ethics, and theirs, not yours, not mine, not what the world says, but yours, that's how I feel like they can evolve to the next level of life and continue that psychological growth.
Out of time. Got to ask this question. Been on my mind, but then it's been you put the microscope on it. Okay. So adult has challenges, things going on, anxiety, all things, they're challenged. Percentage of how much that comes from what they were exposed to in childhood that wasn't resolved.
Who knows? Probably a ton, right? Because I tell people, Steve, from the time I was born until now, is how I've evolved. And it's been all these like input, 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 right?
Yeah.
So until
Yeah.
we can kind of clear that slate, and again, that's what ketamine psychedelics allow us to do is kind of clear all those like preconceived aspects and it allows us for our current view to look at that and be like, gosh, I had no idea that had so much significance to me. Then we can grow forward. But the same way, Steve, that we were evolving between the ages of 5 and 7, when we're 40, 50, 60, 70, it's the exact same way. It's just at a higher level of. So we even though we're adults, we're all still evolving throughout our course of life. And it becomes even more significant when we begin to retire. Because when we retire, we lose a lot of those things, and then we have to learn this other identity. And nobody's learning that yet. And that was something I was talking about the other day. Yes, everybody focuses on veteran suicide and helping to resolve those. I'm a huge proponent of helping with that too. But your highest group of suicides right now is your geriatric population.
Wow.
70-year-olds and up. Where are we talking about that at all, right? So we all have just as much value at the age of 1 as we do at the age of 99. And that's what we've got to do, is the value of human life. And how do we empower that?
Mm. I wish we had more time today, because I would love to keep going. This is so, in my opinion, fundamental. And this is the stuff that nobody
That's
talks
right.
about.
That's right. It's all fundamental. That's the beautiful piece. It's so simple, but we forgot the simple
Yeah.
step. And that's what we've
Yeah.
got to do. Yes.
Yep. And what replaced it? A pill.
That's right. You're right.
Essentially.
Cage it, box it.
Katie,
Yeah.
how do we find out more? The book, I can't believe it's 68 pages. Oh my gosh, I'm in.
I know, it's so easy. I'm like, just pull it up, put your pocket.
Oh,
Yeah. So the book's on Amazon. It's on Kindle. It's coming out hopefully this week on Audible. And then revitalist.com/shop. People can purchase it there. And then right now, if people come to the clinic, so we have in Johnson City, Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee, Tampa, Florida. If they come to the clinics, my staff knows that they can just ask for a book for free. So I'm telling people, like, pay it forward. Get the book, read it for yourself. If you don't need it, pass it along. If you don't know how to talk about mental health, hand out a book. And then that way we can try to get this conversation going, because my theory is that it's just a theory, but it's based on a lot of very new scientific, peer-reviewed aspects that are out there. So if we can get this conversation going now, then that hopefully might be a piece of the change that's needed.
I'm not saying this just because we're here, but your theory, and in my journey, as I've really focused on a lot of what you're talking about, I am lasered on your theory. It's there. The opposite, everything, and of course, certainly what has impacted our lives. Beginning at birth up until especially 5 to 7. I'm right there with you. Yeah, we need to talk about this. I can't believe it, 2024, and we still, but what Big Pharma jumped in, and they got everybody's ear. But that's a whole other podcast.
We'll work on that one too, Steve.
Yeah, work on that.
Probably the inflamed
one
theory.
time. Yeah, inflammation. That's another. We didn't even get in that. Thank you so much for today. Very much looking forward next time we get together.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate your time.
Yep. Thank you. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.